The Secret Life of Walter Mitty is a 2013 adventure comedy, directed by and starring Ben Stiller. It utilizes many cinematic elements to aid in its visual appeal as well as its role in visual storytelling. The first of these elements that I'll be discussing is the film's use of limited space. Limited space is interesting because it combines deep space and flat space in a way of showing multiple things happening separately in the same world, or to show that a character or thing is trapped in a certain part of the world. An example of this is at the beginning of the film when Walter is sitting at his home, trapped along the z-axis in between his home and the window, representing the outside world. Another good example of this is when he's moving his mother into her retirement home and the piano is being moved in the background while they are acting in the midground. In the same world, but on a different plane. Another cinematic element used in the film is depth of field, which is used to bring the audience's attention to something in particular on the screen, which in turn provides the audience with information to assess what in the world is important to the characters. This happens at the beginning of the film when the only thing on Walter's mind is leaving a wink on a girl's eHarmony profile. The extremely shallow depth of field shows the courage involved in making that decision and builds suspense in the audience. Another example of this is when Cheryl is on the phone while Walter is showing her son tricks on his skateboard. This is not only used to hide the fact that Ben Stiller wasn't actually the person doing the tricks on the skateboard, but also to show that Cheryl is totally absorbed in her phone call and anything outside of that is unimportant or out of focus to her. Rhythm is something used very frequently toward the beginning of the film to bring the audience's attention to the fact that Walter's life is very boring, monotonous, and repetitive. This can be seen in the hallway outside of his apartment, the buildings that he passes by on his way to work, and the building he works in itself. It can especially be seen in the hallways outside of his office, which are lined with magazine covers of years past, which not only show the repetition, but also sort of trap him in his office, metaphorically. Back to the use of depth in space, the film also utilizes the lack of depth through flat space extremely well. This, again, can be seen a lot at the beginning of the movie because this is the period in his life in which everything is mundane and, like the name of the element implies, flat. Similar to the shots using rhythm, the shots using flat space are all for the most part in the street or in his office. These kinds of shots play a role in making the audience feel like Walter is trapped or boxed in. On the flip side of flat space is deep space, which the movie also utilizes very well. Shots that emphasize depth don't regularly occur until later in the film, after he has left the city and is traveling in search of the missing negative. Really good examples of this are when he's skateboarding in Iceland or when he's hiking in the mountains in the Middle East. While the first one emphasizes the feeling of freedom and the second one emphasizes the feeling of isolation, both of them actively use deep space to express the escape from the city, which he was previously boxed into. Though Walter doesn't adventure until quite later in the film, he does often daydream before that. For these scenes, there is often a dramatic shift in style from flat space to deep space, showing the dramatization of the dreams. Contrast is used in the film to separate characters from a crowd. This is especially true of Walter, who is always wearing a tan jacket, while all the other people he works with wear black suit jackets. This is to show that he is going against the flow or implying that he is bound to break off from the pack. Regardless of when it's used during the film, it's used to separate characters from the environments. This movie very heavily uses frame within frames, which again acts very similar to flat space in that it boxes in the characters. This is very evident in the elevator scenes in which Walter is literally trapped inside the walls of the elevator, and is also used when Walter is meeting with his sister and has a brief moment of nostalgia when they are framed together between two pillars, showing that they are having a moment that only the two of them would understand, which doesn't involve the outside world. Another use of the frame within a frame can be found when Walter holds the reel of negatives up to his face and is framed within the missing negative, which then leads to his whole drive being finding the missing negative, trapped within that sole motive. Along with frame within a frame, the film uses a very similar element called surface division, in which the frame is split so that the characters or things are physically separated to show distance. This can be seen when Walter is literally between himself and Cheryl during his daydream. This is done to show that he is lost inside the dream. More examples of surface division can be seen in the park when Cheryl is on the phone on the right side of the tree that divides her and Walter, who is on the other side of the tree. Color is also a very important part of the film. Like I said earlier, Walter's tan jacket distinguishes him in a crowd, But also, Walter's sister's pink shirt makes the audience understand that she is different from most other people that are wearing suits and ties. The color of the world around Walter is also reflective on the way he perceives the world around him. This can be seen in the walls of the monotone city, which transition to the vivid color in his daydreams, as well as the vivid color of his environment once he finally escapes the city. The final element I'll be covering is probably the most distinct, and that is lines. Lines make up everything in this film, and each time a line is used, it's used on purpose. When he is walking the streets through the city, the horizontal and vertical lines constantly box him in. When he's skateboarding down the hill in Iceland, he's riding down a sinuous line which is associated with freedom and a sense of peace, which reflects his own feelings at that point in the movie. Every time there is a distinct line in the frame, it is used to further exemplify how Walter is feeling in that exact moment. The film, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, is a cinematically rich film with a lot to dissect. What I covered in this video just scrapes the surface of the amount of time and thought that went into making each and every shot. Movies like this give you even more of a reason to appreciate the art of movie making and cinematography.